A few seconds. Okay. So I think we're running. So do you bring? Are we ready to run? Yeah, I'm just okay. Well, so with a little delay, welcome to this second day of Leonardo Laser Talks. And it's the second round of the Leonardo Laser Talks series at Aalborg University here in Denmark. And I am Morten Sondergaard. I'm the director of the Erasmus Media Arts Cultures program and coordinator of the Laser Talks program as well of the Relate Research Group at Aalborg University. And as you may know, the Leonardo ISAST Lasers are a program of international gatherings that bring artists, scientists, humanists, and technologists together for informal presentations, performances, and conversations with the wider public. The mission of the lasers is to encourage contribution to the cultural environment of a region by fostering interdisciplinary dialogue and opportunities for community building to over 40 cities around the world. And this may then be, if the counting is right, the 41st city as part of that mapping. So this is the second. The first one was yesterday. The second laser talk at Aalborg University, and we're very proud to be hosting this laser talk series as the first uni and location in Scandinavia. In this series at Aalborg University and in the Relate Research Group context, we are making inquiries into the transitory practices of art and technology and their cultures. So we're asking, what is the status of the transitory practices and their regimes of information technologies today? In this two-day symposium, which is the Politics of Machines micro edition, which you would be able to see if you were here and are here physically in Aalborg, we will untangle this question through the eyes of established and emerging media artists, art practitioners and scholars. So we are revisiting the late Susan Lee Starr's notion from 1996 of transition regimes. And the symposium here will reevaluate the shifts occasioned by widespread and ubiquitous new technologies. Where are we with these transitions today, and what is the role of media art in those transitions? Those were the questions yesterday. Those questions continue today and will be discussed further in the future as well. So during the laser talks, the thematics and challenges of transition regimes are discussed in conversations with various researchers and artists. In the first panel yesterday, we had Tanya Toft, Mogens Jacobsen, and Alessandro Ludovico, who were discussing the history and current developments of media art in Denmark within and in relation to Scandinavia and international media art scenes. Joining me this morning, and I'm very happy to announce the lineup, is Max Hadler from Hong Kong, who will be joining us on Zoom. It's Hans Christian Gilliam, and it's Diana Pankova and Marie Hollande, who will be joining us from Aarhus on Zoom as well. They will all, in their different ways and from their different positions, address the transition regimes from their respective practices. But before introducing the speakers even more, I just want to lose my sound. Here we are. Just a brief note on cultures, in the words of Starr, also maybe to repeat what I said yesterday, but to bring her words into the room, since she cannot herself, unfortunately. She's not with us anymore. But she writes in 1996 that culture is a word like society, with a number of unfortunate definitional and philosophical problems associated with it. It is an easy concept to reify or make monolithic, easy to freeze or concretize what is in fact always a series of complex motions and improvisations. Her intent, and also my intent, and our intent here with this series in using the word cultures is to call attention to the multiple non-monolithic sense in which we are trying to talk about a set of practices with symbolic and communal meaning. And as she writes, at the same time, we could think of culture in another meaning altogether, as in cultured milk or yogurt, a small organism that affects change over time. So, joining me today, as I said, is Max Hadler. And Max is an artist, researcher, curator, and educator who works with abstract animation, video installation, and audiovisual performance. He holds a master's degree from Royal College of Art and a doctorate in fine art from the University of East London. Max's work has been shown at festivals and institutions such as Resonate, Ars Electronica, ZKM Center of Art and Media, MoCA Taipei, and Beijing Mensheng Museum. He's joining us from Hong Kong, where he works at CTU, the School of Creative Media there. Hans Christian Gilliam has moved between installations, experimental video, live performance, and set design since he graduated from the intermediate department of the Academy of Fine Arts in Trondheim in 1999. He got a kickstart by having 1 year residency at Künstlerhaus Bethanien in Berlin, and also was quite active in theater and dance in the Zeros, together with choreographer Eva Cecilie Ricardsen. Together they established Kreuzer Company with a yearly production from 2000 to 2006. These later years, and since 2006, Gilliam has worked with a longer-term project he has called Conversation with Spaces. And this project explores, mainly through large-scale installations, perception of change and transformation in the meeting between the ephemeral media of light, projection, sound, and motion with physical structures. Diana Pankova is a philosopher and photographer. In her visual search, she works with varied types of cameras and techniques and experiments with time, space, shape, scale, and connections in between. Her favorite artistic companions are diverse pinhole cameras. They are all on display outside, actually. If you are here, you can go and see them after the session here. She's a participant in many photographic exhibitions around the world, instructor of pinhole workshops, and Diana's academic research revolves around the existential and sensory experience of interacting with art from the perspective of the artist, the viewer, and other possible sides. At the moment, her interests especially focus on multisensory synesthetic experiences of immersive interactive art and their relation to communication. And finally, joining us from Aarhus, Marie Højlund is a sound artist and musician, and from August 2019, an assistant professor in sound studies at Aarhus University. In 2017, she finished her PhD about noise and listening in Danish hospitals, and together with Morten Riis, she presents the project The Overheard. During her work, she has been engaged in developing novel sound technologies for alternative listening situations and designing sound environments for various public spaces. She also releases music under the artist name K. Marie and is a house composer at Aarhus Theatre and play in the Danish band Nephew. So with this lineup and with this introduction to our speakers, I'm proud to present the first speaker, which is Max Hadler, joining us from Hong Kong. So please, Max, the word and the stage is yours.
No, I thought I'm going last, but I'm happy to go first. So yes, I'm Max Hadler. I'm an abstract and experimental animated media artist based in Hong Kong. And so, yeah, digital computing technology has always played a pivotal role in my artistic development. Getting my first computer in the early 90s, I saw the technology mature, and as I myself was coming of age. Computer games were a first attraction, quickly complemented by 8-bit soft pornographic images purveyed on floppy disks by a sweaty classmate of my cousin. But soon paint and animation programs, sound editing software, and music production packages started arriving on those floppy disks as well. And it wasn't before long that I found myself spending days on end trying to figure out these new arrivals. Soon the computer had taken over as a tool from all other artistic pursuits that I was following, that I had been following at the time, replacing pencil and brush, pen and paper, camera, violin, guitar, and drum set. So I was growing up a digital native. I think that's fair to say. Software tends to be based on analog equivalence. Video editing software resembles a Steenbeck film editing table. Paint packages emulate paints, brushes, and paper types. Music programs emulate analog instruments, synths, and sequencers, and so on. But software is also always ordered by the logic of code and by the thinking of software developers whose medium is code. The computer itself, of course, doesn't distinguish between media. It processes and applies its calculations according to whatever it is being fed. It is this underlying equality of media that excites me about making work in the digital age. It relates directly to my own artistic practice, rooted in the experience of growing up with computers and exploring different software packages, playing them really as if they were games, kind of exploring and just sort of finding my way, irrespective of medium. Sound, music, still, and moving image, all media are interacted with through similar interfaces and operations. Cutting and slicing, copy-paste, layering, keyframing, effects and transitions, additions, and multiplications. All media can be worked with simultaneously, equally, as they're essentially reduced to maths. There's an almost spiritual quality to it, as all becomes zeros and ones, pure data. While I previously saw music and painting and design and filmmaking as disparate disciplines that I had to choose between, kind of choose one. Working with computers allowed me to see them as building blocks of an integrated art form, coming together in the form of, in my case, abstract animation. The immaterial nature of the digital realm, importantly, allows for endless nonlinear editing and experimentation without signal loss or cost implications. As an experimental animator, these aspects are vitally important to me. Computing ultimately contains an element of democratization. I'm not sure if Marx would agree, but I think it's fair to say that on some level, computing has leveled the playing field, has made access to the means of production more open. Of course, this is debatable, but I think on a base level, almost anyone can buy a computer and find software powerful enough to create artworks, moving image works, sound works, etc., which previously would have required roomfuls of prohibitively expensive film stock, systems, equipment. While my films are very much inspired by 20th century avant-gardes, I don't think I would have been taken up a career as an artist had I been born 50 or 60 years earlier. I don't think I would have had the patience, and I don't think I would have had the means. I realized that this is a highly personal and selective view of these transition regimes of information technologies that we have found ourselves in. But yes, I think in terms of my own development and career trajectory, that's the story. So I believe now you guys, someone will play some excerpts of my films to hopefully, maybe put what I said a little bit in context. So yeah, please play the film. Thank you. Thank you.
Very nice. Very interesting to think about that transition regimes you made to actually become an artist. That's another perspective I didn't think of. So, but with this presentation, I also want to now pass the word to Hans Christian, Gilliam, HC, and now I will pass on the sound equipment to you.
Oh, right. It's like an award ceremony.
It is, exactly, yeah.
Like this.
No.
Or the other way?
Yeah, exactly. So let me help you this way. So and you can take this, and then another present for you.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so I have to remember my own slides now. Okay. Thank you for inviting me, and it's nice to be part of this context. I thought I would start by just commenting on the actual context, which for me is kind of a strange way of communicating, you know, this hybrid space idea of having to negotiate with some speakers online, some of the audience online, some of the audience present in this space. We're kind of constantly negotiating where we are, which is a little bit what I will talk about, at least touch on in my presentation. This first image is actually taken from a celebration of a Turkish football team winning the league in Turkey. I just thought it was an amazing picture of these glowing rectangles becoming just kind of a celebration of light in the street, just as an introduction. I forgot my poking stick, but so as Max was talking about his first computer, I have to talk about my first computer, which was the Sinclair ZX81, which was, it came out in 81. I think I bought it like a couple of years later. This was one of the first computers, affordable computers. It cost like 70 pounds at the time, so around 80 euros maybe. And it had 1K of RAM, and like on a normal computer today, that would be about 6 lines of text. That would be the whole RAM, which also was the like for the display and everything. So it's quite amazing that they were able to make it. So you could say it was kind of the Raspberry Pi of the time in one way. But what the reason I actually started to look for this was because I remembered the sound of putting software on tape, because then you didn't have storage space on the computer, recorded it onto an audio tape. And there was this really intriguing sound when you actually listen to this. And when you start to Google things these days, of course, you have this, like Star is talking about these Trojan doors. I mean, that's what the internet is for me, or I mean, in general. So you have this whole nostalgia scene of old computers. So, I mean, it's like if you Google ZX81 on YouTube, you get so many like long, intense videos. But kind of the main thing I remember is actually buying these magazines where you had to type in the code like you see here. So this is actually from a magazine. So yeah, we do not often print Space Invader games, but blah, blah, blah. And then I was like sitting in my room typing in this on this horrible keyboard, which is basically the same type of keyboard you have on ATM terminals. You have to press really hard and do these key combinations, which was kind of a very frustrating experience, basically. And Max's presentation also, I'm really bad at digressions, so here's my first digression. But his talk reminded me of when I was applying for the Art Academy in Trondheim. We have this trial week, where you're supposed to make one work during that week before they decide if you are accepted or not. And I remember spending half the time stealing software on floppy disks, because I think like Premiere and Photoshop, they came like with 11 floppy disks. So while nobody's watching, I was working a little bit, copying, because I didn't think I would come in anyway. So it's just, at least then I would have the video and photo editing software after the trial week. But so, I mean, that could also be a separate talk, just talking about pirate software. I mean, that's kind of a thing in itself, which I'm not going to talk about. So, So this is kind of the extremes of computer culture in one way these days. You have the kind of the, you could think of the ever-present smartphones, completely kind of like black box devices. You have no real access to what's going on inside, compared to the microcontrollers where you can connect inputs and outputs and interact with other ways of using a computer. And I'm going to refer a little bit to an Australian writer and designer called Mitchell Whitelaw, which I think has written some interesting things about what he calls transmaterialism. But he starts by referring to Matthew Kirschenbaum, who has this relatively known quote, that computers are material machines dedicated to propagating a behavioral illusion, or call it a working model of immateriality. So I mean, one obvious example would be the cloud, which is actually, you know, server houses somewhere. So you have you have a physical infrastructure somewhere, and then you have this interesting error mechanisms that has to support this illusion of digital being a general thing. So I'll just mention two examples of that, which might not, I mean, the first one might not work for some of you because I'm talking about the audio CD. So a high quality produced disc contains 20 to 30 errors per second, which is quite amazing. And without this error correction system built into it, any CD would be unusable. So this error correction system then helps to maintain the illusion of the immaterial quality of the digital audio, which of course you can also then put on a USB pin and play on your computer, or you could have it on your phone, etc. So you have this kind of illusion of something being available everywhere, but it's always supported by this actual very material and physical specificity. The second example, which is again stolen or gleaned from Whitelaw, is just talking about the digital network, where we all spend more of our time. He calls that a vast infrastructure of generality. It deploys a system which is standardized, formally defined, highly structured, and internally consistent. As I draft my email, it exists as a pattern of voltages and magnetic flux inside my computer. But to transmit that pattern effectively to somebody else, the digital network must erase or resist any local errors or inconsistencies that it might encounter along the way. So that it doesn't matter if the pattern travels by optical fiber or copper, or in radio waves, or if a boat anchor cuts through a cable near Indonesia. It does not matter that your computer is made of different atoms to mine. Those are specificities, local material events and instances. Digital culture and network space absorb specificities, compensates for them, rectifies them into generality. So it's constantly this negotiation between local material specificity and this digital general thing, which I find quite interesting. Again, as a side note, you could also mention the geology of media thoughts of Jussi Parikka in terms of the material aspect of computing, like the materials, metals, waste, chemistry, energy use, and carbon footprint, which is also part of the very material specificity of computers. Another thing that Whitelaw talks about is the computer as a transduction device, basically something that converts one kind of energy to another. He kind of extends it to also apply to energy to different matters. And he says that the computing is an incredibly dynamic, pliable set of techniques for manipulating material environment. So paradoxically, the very generalities of computing makes it also a powerful tool for transduction, that is the propagation of specificities. So digital fabrication could be one example of this, for instance, where you have a digital pattern on your computer, you convert that to laser cutter instructions, and you end up with a physical form. Yeah, I briefly also mentioned the microcontroller as a way of opening up to the physical world with being able to connect directly to inputs and outputs. Yeah, I'm going to have a 1-hour lecture compressed into 10 minutes as usual, but yeah, I'll just skip to the next slide, which is just an example of one project I did with microcontrollers and kind of a very local network. I set up a series of mechanical wind-up birds, I call them. They were basically mechanical peckers that were communicating in the forest. So they were communicating using this XP digital network. So there was basically a call and response. So one was making a mechanical sound, and another one was responding. So you can get these kind of patterns of sound moving through the forest. So the same, so what I think is the beauty of then thinking about the general qualities of the digital software is that the same code that I could use to control the pecking of the woodpeckers could then be used to switch on and off lights. Or for instance, this example here is I'm turning on and off the opacity of a series of panels. So applying electricity to this material makes it transparent. So I'm just turning it on and off. So it's really, so again, it's the meeting of this very general control system and the material specificity of the materials, being it this wooden slit drum or these kind of a more high-tech screen material here. Okay. So now we are moving over to something I spend a lot of time on, which is the building software tools and instruments. And somebody who's also been quoted quite a lot, I guess, is Jack Burnham from his Art Forum text from 1968, talking about system aesthetics, which is quite inspiring, has inspired me quite a lot. He describes a move from objects with fixed shapes and boundaries to thinking about systems which may be altered in space and time. The behavior of the system is influenced both by external conditions and mechanisms of control. So according to Burnham, there's a shift from end result to process, and the primary role of the artist is now as the maker of aesthetic decisions. So if I should sum up my work in one sentence, I could say that I create systems, then explore them. So I make a control structure, a digital control structure, which then relates to a physical environment. That's kind of a very brief way of putting it. And of course, one important aspect of working with these software tools was this idea of real time, that you can do things. You don't have to do, like when I worked a lot with the dancers, as Morten was saying, and doing live video work, we made these kind of real time tools that you can actually do things on the go. So we thought of this idea of making software instruments that we could improvise in a similar way that musicians could do. That was the ideal, at least. So I don't use it as much anymore, but I used quite a lot a program called Max MSP, which basically is kind of a visual programming language where you basically connect boxes together and send messages. You can create quite complex structures out of it. So one example of how I would use this idea of a system, which would then create quite different results, was the performance piece Sync, which was a collaboration with Justin Bennett on sound and Eva Cecilia, choreographer that I worked quite a lot with, and the dancer. And we had one premise for the sound and image, is that nothing was pre-recorded, so everything came from whatever the dancer was doing on stage in terms of creating sounds on the floor or falling down. And I was filming it and using a software that could manipulate both. It was kind of combining analog feedback and time manipulating techniques, basically. So the different types of spaces would then completely change the perception of the piece. So I think that fits quite well with what Burnham was saying about external conditions combined with these control structures. Okay. Next. This is something I also could have a whole lecture about, this idea of a flat screen versus being in a physical space. But I'm going to start by just mentioning something from Paul Virilio, the French philosopher. He had this, I mean, he also always had these really strange names for his concepts, but he had something he called polar inertia, which came partly from Edmund Husserl, who had this thing about the world passing by a walking person instead of a walking person moving through a space. And Virilio kind of extended that to the person becomes stationary in the world that arrives to him or her. So it's kind of a pacification of the person, as it kind of everything is in this glowing rectangle. We're basically living a bit through this device. And that's another link to, I don't know if you know David Abrams, who wrote a really nice book called Becoming Animal. He talks about depth of space. Depth is the dimension of closeness and distance. It implicates the whole of our animal body, situating us physically within the animate landscape. And he talks about this impoverment of depth perception due to flat representations of the world. So he's almost claiming we're living in a flat world because everything we see on the screen, even though it has like, okay, you see an image of a landscape, which has a certain depth because you know it has, but your eyes are actually always looking at the same distance on a flat surface. And in a film, you have the focusing is done for you by the camera, the framing is done for you. So you're losing this idea of walking around something and actually observing it, which I think is quite essential way of experiencing work, which at least has been quite important for how I try to situate my work in a physical space. So what you see here on screen now is basically one of my floor projection works. And what you see on this side is basically what kind of the flat picture that comes out from my computer. And it is what happens when it is actually projected onto the physical structure, what is happening on when it meets the texture and material qualities in the physical space that makes it the work it is. It's completely not interesting as a flat image, basically. Yeah, so I just wanted to show two more examples of how I work with projection. This was from a theater production where we actually made an organic landscape where I could project onto the surface to create different spaces. And this is a blink, which is kind of one of the series of floor projections that I have done. All right. We could also, of course, have a long lecture about speed, time, and duration, which is another quality that Alessandro was mentioning yesterday, this connection between space and time, which is obviously quite important for me as well. And again, I'll just refer to Virilio, who said that before you could say that space is that which keeps everything from occupying the same place. And that distance has now been erased, so speed has basically collapsed this idea of space. And you could also say that computing is kind of a technology for being elsewhere in time and space, for pushing away the here and now. What I try to do in my series of works where I work with this light pulses moving through different environments, quite slow, just a very slowly moving points of light moving, basically lighting up small details, creating shadows. This kind of focusing on being in that particular space and interacting with, being at a more fixed structure like these frames or being out in the forest where the snow actually then acts as kind of a big projection surface for the light and the shadows. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is kind of as a contrast to kind of the high speed of information technology, I guess. I want to just end with something from Rebecca Solnit, which I think is has written particularly one really good book, which is called River of Shadows. And I'm going to misquote her a little bit, but I'm just going to read it anyway. She writes, or could have written something like this. Those carried along on technology's currents are less connected to local places, to the earth itself, to the limitations of the body and biology, to the malleability of memory and imagination. They're moving into a world where places are being homogenized, where a network of machines and the corporations behind them are dispelling the independence of wilderness, of remoteness, of local culture, a world that is experienced more and more as information and images. It is as though they sacrifice the near to gain the far. And the interesting thing is that she actually writes this about the transformation of the world through the great accelerations that started in the 1830s. So she's actually talking about a completely different time period, but I think it's still quite spot on. A bit like, like Alessandro was saying that the star's text could have been written 2 days ago. It's because it's still relevant somehow. So it's, yeah, I think that's what I had to say today. So.
Thank you, Jose.
So I'll give you the gift back.
Yes, thank you. And wonderful gifts. And now I'm going to pass it to you, Diana. The many gifts I have for you here.
This is our shared cyborg element.
Oh, so, yeah. So, I don't know how to do it. But yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Let's say it's okay.
Yes, and this is for...
So this doesn't matter where to.
No, and this is the microphone. You can just put it in the pocket if you like.
Should
Welcome.
be okay.
Yes.
Okay. Hello. And yeah, it's a bit weird to have the slides behind me. So my name is Diana, as most of you know already, and here I actually feel myself a bit like a glitch in the system, because what I'm talking about can hardly be called media art at all, and it's more. So I thought maybe my role is just to bring the difference and bring the contrast, because contrast is always good for us to understand something that we're stepping from, and that's what I'm talking about, I guess, because after all I'm here, so I should have some role. And well, so my project that you could see there is called Silent Dialogue, and it's Pinhole Photographs, small exhibition. And I'm going to talk not exactly about this exhibition, but about what is Pinhole and why we can bring it here to this discussion. And so we can go to the next slide, I guess. So just to say a couple words for those who don't know, pinhole photography is probably one of the strangest photographic techniques that is special because it doesn't use any lenses to get the picture. It just uses a small hole to get the image. And so it's using the really ancient technique of camera obscura, but instead of comparing to the original camera obscura, it does fixes the image there. And we can go to the next one. And so what I do is, the peculiarity of this technique is that it's so simple that you can make a camera out of anything. You just need to have the light-tight container where you can make a hole, and then you can start experimenting. And that's why it's so fun, because you can have a lot of cameras. You can make a camera every day if you want. And it's a freedom that is that can be made out of anything, and you can make these experiments and see the results made with your own eye, with your own hands. and not depending on anything. And this is one of the things why we can talk about this here, because our technological world is that way that we are constantly dependent on all these technologies that are penetrating our existence. And most of us don't even understand how all this is done. And we're so used to use something that is done for us and kind of shapes our reality. And these things is the possibility to step back from this already shaped for us existence and create something simple that is just created by our will. And yeah, so this is a small bunch of my photosensitive friends that I carry with me everywhere, and yeah, use them as my stepping back from the high-paced life that I have in any moment. Yeah, and we can go to the next. So yeah, and I was thinking to talk just about this pinhole photography as a phenomenon, and how does it even relate to digital technologies, because it can be completely analog technique, but at the same time, nowadays, most people who use it, they do use digital technologies in that, and well, in this case, they play not the medium role, but more like an assistant role, but it's still important. And so pinhole photography in this modern version can be considered as this transitional practice in itself that combines both completely analog and simple and digital and complicated, that actually help these analog things to happen. And so we can go to the next. Yeah, so I was just thinking about several points of relativity to our topic, and one of those is that this pinhole photography is just it's a reaction to this ubiquitous computing world that we're living in. And I thought that comparing to the Susan Starr's version of talking about this ubiquitous computing world, we are still living in that, and it's amazing how relative, how it is important now what she was writing before that, but in our world, I think some shift has changed, and this ubiquitous computing is becoming less and less exciting for people. So people, like, we are so used to living within these technologies that now people are craving for some difference to experience. And one of the ways to experience the difference is to go back to the simple things. So pinhole photography is becoming really popular within different kinds of people, both professional photographers and just people who use it as a hobby, exactly because this is the possibility to step back from this technological world and step back from this high-paced reality we're living in and create something simple and enjoy this simplicity in the world of high complexity that we're living in. And also, it's the possibility to still use technology, but it's a simple way of creating something with your own hands. And this way, you can establish this more intimate dialogue with that. And also, like, it's again, because this is stepping back from what is really normal for us, this is the possibility to, like, consider how technologies work and what do they mean in our world. And so this is still the machines, but not the kind of them that we're used to now. And this tangible connection with them makes it like more, makes us possible to find the humanity in this dialogue with the machines. And so the next one. So another thing is that still, like, of course, it's a popular topic to talk about becoming a cyborg, and we're all kind of cyborgs. Like, even now, we're using these technologies that becomes really part of our body. But I think the difference between digital cyborgs and these analog machine cyborgs is, again, that in digital technologies, it's so normal for us that we don't even notice this connection, and we don't even notice how do we interact with that while using it. But with the simple machines, we have to kind of bring in some labor. We have to tame them and to really spend a lot of time using them and making them part of extension of our body to understand how they work and to get a good picture. So again, it's a good possibility to feel the difference and understand the meaning of what we have every day. And yeah, since these cameras propose us to offer us these different perspectives on the scenes that we're used to see. So this is the possibility one more possibility to step back from the anthropocentrism, because this is we create the images seen not by the human, but by something that it's not even living, and yet we relate us to this, and so this is the way to accept the difference of their worldviews. Yeah, next. And the last point is more personal, I think, because again, this, like, even the possibility to make this exhibition is thanks to digital technologies, because doing these kind of images can be completely analog, and you shouldn't think about any using computers or anything. But in life that I have, where I have to move between the countries very often, and I can't keep all the materials, and I can't do the dark room, and I'm basically not at home anytime I am anywhere. So, but having the possibility to keep all my files in my computer and very quickly print anything digitally, just make it happen. And so this is what Susan Starr was talking about, that computing makes us feel more homely, even where at the same time when we have the possibility to have this nomadic life and always be homeless. So this is also a case of this. And also, again, the simple thing that even to make this happen is possible due to this worldwide community that we have here, and the possibility to contact people very quickly and make quick decisions and make quick digital files, and this is all thanks to technology. So, yeah, I was thinking what conclusion can I do out of that, but I decided that I will leave it just a part of the discussion, and these are the things that I was thinking, how can I relate to all this discussion that we have here, because what I do is not really digital technology, is not that fascinating as other projects presented here, but maybe it can make some contrast difference to encompass everything we're talking about. Yeah, that's it.
Your project is absolutely as fascinating as anything else. So presented here, so thank you for that. And now we are going to Aarhus. And Marie, sweet Marie, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can we see you though? Just a minute, you're coming up. 2 seconds. Now you're there. Hello, Marie.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. We were a bit desperate on the other side because we couldn't see the presentation, so we were trying to imagine all the things going on. But now Max found the YouTube link, so so we saw the last part of Diana. But anyway, I'm very happy to be a part of this. I'm, as Morten said, I'm a sound artist and a composer, and also an assistant professor in sound studies at Aarhus University. And I would like to start by showing you the first 2 minutes of a documentation video of a project I did together with my colleague Morten Ries called Hemmeligheder bygger bro, which could be translated into Secrets that Build Bridges. During the summer of 2018, the citizens of Aarhus in Denmark were invited to call in their innermost secrets to an automatic answering machine. And these intimate glimpses into their hidden life, we got around 1,000 secrets, were then transformed into musical notes and rhythms using special made software that could be played by the city's town hall carillons. So throughout Aarhus Festu, which is a week-long annual city celebration, the bells filled the air in central Aarhus, transforming these very intimate hidden voices into public weird ringing announcements. And I don't know if I'm going to show the video or someone else. It's only the first 2 minutes.
Jeg griner af min chefs hemmeligheder, selvom den slet ikke er sjov. Min chefs vittigheder, selvom de slet ikke er sjov.
So with my own background, very close to Max's description of playing and exploring the democratization of use of music technology, I would like to turn the ear to the everyday listener that do not explore the creative and democratic tools. And I'm interested in how and why we use personal media technologies, as for instance, white noise machines to sleep better at night, or noise cancelling headphones to work, to change sensory experience and managing how we feel and controlling our connection to our surroundings and others. And these acts of sonic self-control are among our most common everyday media tech practices. Millions of apps that generate nature sounds have been downloaded, for example, and headphones are now a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the German sound anthropologist Holger Schulze and his colleagues argues in their recent book, Soundworks, that we are bathed in functional information-based sounds, a sonic dominance that domesticates us based on alarming, rejection, confirmation, punishment, or reward. Furthermore, we are constantly listened to by our ubiquitous technologies to the extent that we internalize this technological listening. He calls it a pan-acousticon, a transition regime of technosensuality where power and sensory hierarchies are embedded into the gadgets and technologies of everyday life. In this world of sonic information dominance, media theorist Mac Haggard, in his book Hush, argues that our survival strategy, or one of the survival strategies, is to use individuated orphic technologies that provides us with a form of control to counteract the sonic information dominance. Devices used to control how we are affected and affect affected by the sonic dominance. So they work not because of information transfer, but actually the opposite. They are based on noise, the opposite of information, at least in communication theory. As Orpheus sang back at the sirens to resist their calls, Orphic technologies block out communication, allowing the user to shape the space around them for resisting information in order to rest, sleep, or concentrate. So it mediates our relation to the sonic dominated environment, giving a means of control of it. And he says, you're using your phone not only to communicate, but rather to render communication impossible. In practice, you contradict the notion that media are solely technologies for transmission of information and facilitation of communication. However, he also argues that even though this sonic control helps you, in the word of the Beats headphone slogan, to hear what you want, it all happens inside your head or a micro-individualized space. And the cost is therefore, according to Hegel, that it might make us even more sensitive to messy, shared, but also maybe generative and social situations that now become a part of what we don't want to hear. And to understand this sensitivity better, I think that Starr points to a central problem with wireless computing that I think dominates the listening Orphic technologies that I describe now, namely the boring and reductive idea of the body that is integrated into technologies. And I quote her, if we are to have ubiquitous wireless computing in the future, perhaps it's time to have a less boring idea of the body right now, a body politics, not just the substrate for meetings or toys. So if we, for instance, are to take a look at the status of the body in these Apple headphones, AirPods, and the new big thing with these new ones I have, the promise for listeners to feel immersed and surrounded by, for instance, an orchestra, or being in a room with musicians through spatial audio and head tracking to support a feeling of immersion. But what it does is to provide a new virtual individualized bubble designed only for the head, a head without a body and bodily agency. So we become a listening camera on a distance, and the ghost orchestra are also without bodies. And as Starr argues in her article on the Trojan door, cognition is situated. Thinking happens in space and time, not just abstractly in people's head. And of course, cognition is also distributed and collective. So listening through AirPods to spatial audio, we are still in a situation, in a room, among other things, and maybe other people. We are in a blended space, not a virtual one. So I could also rewrite Starr's quote, listening happens in space and time, not just abstractly in people's heads through headphones. So if we look at why we go to concerts to feel immersed in music, it's of course not only one answer, but for me at least, it's also to feel my whole body as an ear, and also to feel the multi-sensory interplays between smells, bodies, and the overheard noise that surprises and opens to the unexpected. So when we delete all of that, do we feel then more connected and immersed, or maybe more isolated and distant? After this not very positive short analysis of listening, the listening transition regime, we are also, as Starr says, in a constructive situation where such errors are also marked by both possibility and confusion. And therefore, there's also a possibility for research artists and others to help gain a balanced view, as she calls it, a possible occasion for reflection and stepping back, as Diana also said. And in that context, Hegel provides us with thoughts for a balanced view, but he also stressed the need for artists and designers to create alternative listening technologies, or what he calls ritual technologies that breaks this individualized isolation and going from hearing what we want to wanting what we hear through interventions that reflect upon and open up our own media enclosures, or listening out. to also engage voices that are unfamiliar or uneasy on the air. And similarly, Holger Schulz and his colleagues argue for nanopolitical tactics that changes listening situation and detach normal ways of listening through disruptive sensologies in public and mainstream arenas as well, not only in artistic and experimental context. So returning to our project, we wanted to invite normal citizens of Aarhus to listen differently, not only to the Carillions, but also to other voices that we normally tune into as information signals. So we wanted to reverse the voice, what is signal and what is noise, to dismantle the suppressive sensuality of individualized technologies, listening technologies as well, and trying to make heard in a new way the public instrument, but also the very, very intimate situation and individualized space of sharing secrets. And in that sense, it was really important for us that this project was actually played out on the town square in Aarhus, and not only inside a museum or in other controlled environments. So for us, the most interesting takeaway from our evaluation of this project was actually the massive interest in sharing the noise of our secrets. So we gathered all these 1,000 secrets, but also something that we did not even think about before, but we made listening walks in the park, where we experienced that listeners were making very, very imaginative stories out of these weird small melodies about parties, infidelity, theft, and other very developed narratives through these very small melodies. So in a way, I see a clash between the listening industry that urges this Orphic listening situation, but also on the positive side, I see a new broad interest in both healthcare industries, city development, to create other ritual media or shared listening situations that engages an active and imaginative listener with a body that is not only a boring head. Thank you.
So much, everybody, for these wonderful sharing these wonderful ideas and practices. Yeah. So just getting sound. So I think, as Jose was also pointing out, this whole setup of streaming and having Zoom and live and non-live and it's very transitional. And I would have loved to have a discussion right now, because I think there's so many ideas emerging from both yesterday and today. But I actually feel like we need to do something more maybe nomadic, and actually sit together later as well and talk about this more further and deeper, and maybe not discuss it here, where I'm fearing that passing around the microphone and the streams and everything will maybe not help us discuss it in the depth that I think we need. So I actually want to just right now thank you, all the speakers in this panel, for sharing your ideas, and also then say that I want to actually pick this up, all these ideas that have come out of engaging with Star's text from yesterday and today, and move on with this in other formats. And that is the promise I will end with. So a transitional promise. But again, thank you, Jose. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Max from Hong Kong, if you can hear us. And thank you, Marie, again, for joining us from Aarhus, from your home office. And take care out there, and see you soon. Thank you.